Welcome to what is sure to be an exciting episode of the IoTSSA Cybersecurity Experts Panel. I'm your host, Brian Sherman, Director of Content for IoTSSA. We have an informative, interactive discussion on tap today covering a timely and extremely crucial topic for the channel, building a formidable MSP security practice. Joining me today to share their insight and advice on the topic include 3 MSPs and members of our IoTSSA Advisory Board. First off, we've got Daniel Johnson, owner and president of Machine Logic. We're also joined with Don Wilson, CEO of BlueFin Technologies, and Eric Rieger, founder and president of WebIT Services. Why don't we start off, Don, do you want to introduce yourself and your company for us?
Hi, everyone. My name is Don Wilson. I am CEO of BlueFin Technology Group. We're here in Jacksonville, Florida, sunny Florida. And my role in the company is actually the CEO, but I also oversee all the sales and marketing. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. So.
Excellent. Looking forward to tapping into that expertise for sure. Eric, why don't you do a quick intro for us?
Sure. I'm Eric Rieger, founder and president of WebIT Services. We've been in business for going on 24 years here in the Chicago suburbs. We manage small to medium-sized businesses, soup to nuts, a couple different ways we work with people. If they're smaller, they're pretty much their outsourced IT department. If they're a little larger, we do co-managed IT. So the biggest thing, that we're really focusing on, outside of the security thing is just getting a roadmap going. If we got new clients coming in, bringing in the roadmap, security is kind of an afterthought a lot of times. So we're really just out there educating and discussing things at this point.
Fantastic. And Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel Johnson. I'm the CEO of Machine Logic. We're a managed services provider in the Denver area. We focus on cloud security and collaboration, primarily around the Microsoft 365 stack. We're starting to push into the co-managed space as well, but also functioning kind of as a traditional full-service MSP for clients in the 25 to 500 employee range.
Fantastic. Well, we're very happy on behalf of IoTSSA to have all 3 of you here today, and then for the work that you're doing on the advisory board to help us develop resources for the channel. But really, the whole goal today is kind of to talk about some of the topics that are top of mind and some of the best practices that should be for the MSP community today. I just want to start off with something, though, that's I won't say fun because it's kind of scary, but what's the worst cybersecurity horror story that you've encountered in your career, either from your personal experience or something that may have been shared by peer? Obviously, we don't need any names involved, but Eric, why don't we start with you? Anything to share with the group?
Sure. Yeah, I'm part of a few different peer groups, and I had a story shared with me at one of our luncheons. Organization had taken on a fairly significantly sized client. They went through their onboarding, brought in a business continuity solution, both on-site and off-premise, and set everything up. First mistake was the engineer didn't follow the onboarding process document, so the BCDR unit was left with default credentials. The cloud side of things was left with default credentials. And what had happened is the client was compromised through remote desktop, through RDP, which is one of the big ones that out there. It's either the email, the phishing, or through RDP is what we're seeing is the primary attack points. So they were compromised through RDP, and then from what they were able to determine after the forensics were done, the bad guys were there for about 6 to 7 months, just sitting and observing how the MSP did all of their work. So after that, when they were confident they could access both the on-premise and off-site backups, they went in systematically and deleted all of the backups, launched the encryption, and then proceeded to, transactionally contact the client and the MSP saying, this is what we've done, don't even try. Here's the ransom demand. Once you pay it, we will assist you with recovery. I mean, it was literally like a full business transaction. And that's what I'm hearing more and more of is that, this has become kind of an industry where even the customer service, quote unquote, aspect of it is top notch because they want repeat business. The problem with this one was the ransomware created different encryption keys for every single file. So they were 800,000 plus files just on the servers that had to be decrypted one at a time. So they were significantly backlogged with work trying to get this customer up and running again. Obviously, they lost the business after that happened. So, and then there was a threat of a lawsuit and all this. So it really kind of, started opening our eyes to not just the risks of, something like this happening and kind of, taking an introspective look at what we're doing and how we're battening our own hatches down in our processes and whatnot. But from a legal aspect, the cyber insurance side of things, because these insurers are now really starting to crack down on enforcement of when you sign your policies. Here's what you're agreeing to, saying you're taking all these preventative measures. And a lot of times people are just signing pieces of paper because their insurance provider says, here you're covered. And then, the MSPs are going to be caught in the middle again. Because if your client's signing something saying, oh, well, they're taking care of all this for us, here's where it can get really ugly really quick. So that's probably the worst horror story I've heard so far.
And that is a bad one. I was going to ask you if it was the same MSP that was sharing the story that fixed the problem, but apparently it was in this case, because sometimes it's what you end up as an MSP going in to try to fix that somebody else had done. So that's
yeah. No, this was their own making and their own fixing. And then on top of all the work and the lost labor and all that, then they, wound up losing a client and get a damage to their reputation as well. So it's
worst case scenario. Yeah, that's the horrible thing. How about you, Dawn?
Yeah.
So there was a client, and they had refused a backup solution, and then they'd been ransomware in the past, but decided that they were still okay with and refused the backup solution that was actually offered to them. And so they did not have that solution. So at one point it was an alert that came in, and that client actually was compromised. They had about 38 terabytes of data. And the backup solution they had, they did it without discussing it with us, obviously, and it did not work out in their favor because they didn't actually have everything backed up. And so with that occurring, we were able to take the NAS device offline, pull it, start actually remediating some of the problems. But when they went to get the data to restore, they didn't even know the process of the restoration. They didn't realize that it was data that was missing. So all said and done, it took about 8 weeks for them to retrieve the data that was retrievable. So they were down for that period of time. They still had some data loss because some of those files were encrypted, and they could not do anything with those. But essentially, I think it's important, we were very adamant that they sign a agreement saying a piece of paper that waived us from any liability at that point, because they refused to do it. Now I know things have changed quite a bit, and if they're not taking your backup, you can actually be in trouble now, because you are knowingly running the risk of having something like that happen. So in turn, they've kind of changed their ways quite a bit, and some things they definitely went with the recommendation of the backup that we provided.
Is that something that you've used with other clients as well? Have you kind of learned to use them, not as a personal example, but an example of here's the things that can go wrong, and by the way, they're local or companies that are in our area?
Right, and the bad part was is they didn't even know how to go about getting their data back, and the client made that decision, and that was hard because they expected it just to be able to be a flip of a switch and hey, my data's back, and it did not. The solution that they had did not do that, and so that was definitely challenging for them.
Tough lessons to learn.
Right.
Daniel, what stories do you have for us?
Well, I don't know if I can top that first story. That's a doozy. But I think both of those stories highlight a key fact that there's a couple of things there. One, MSPs have to be really diligent about securing your own business Make sure that you have multi-factor authentication, that you have an incident security policy, that you know how to deal with these types of incidents, but then take that same security framework and implement that into your customer base. A lot of customers assume that we have all their data and it's all backed up forever and ever, amen. And when it comes time to restore after a ransomware hit or something like that, I think a lot of customers and a lot of MSPs will come up short because they haven't had that important discussion about, do we have all the right security protocols and tools in place? Are we using MFA? Are we using conditional access? If we're backing up all that data, are we backing up all of it? Are we retaining it for the right amount of time? And really, how quickly can we restore that data? Having that written down and agreed upon and reviewed on a regular basis is a huge piece of that. The problem is we're fighting against organized crime. And like you said, Eric, it's almost gotten to the point where it's a customer service business. They're looking for repeatable successes. They're creating revenue streams from this. And they're escalating the issues so now, typically it's been, as long as you have a backup, you're safe. Well, now it's, hey, if you don't pay the ransom, you might be able to restore your data, but we're gonna publish all your information on the dark web. We're gonna dox your clients. We're gonna go after your clients and their clients. And now you have a huge reputation issue. You have an ever-growing threat that's now kind of permeating on the dark web. And there's not a lot of great defenses against that other than preventing it from happening in the first place. And I think that's where a lot of the challenge in the industry happens. And then as an industry, we have a reputation that we need to withhold, hold up, and make sure that we can, as an industry, people will trust MSPs, and it won't be a thing of, oh, you're an MSP. I've seen all these threats that are coming through your tool set, and you're the people that are always in the news. We have to turn the tide on that. And it's through those best practices, I think, that'll get us there.
Yeah, I think we learned the term, it's probably coined right off the managed services business model, is ransomware as a service. It's becoming a not just a cottage industry, but a large industry worldwide. It's getting scarier. So thank you all for sharing the insight on that point. But we have, as an IoTSSA Advisory Board, one of the members shared a story of actually being hacked and going through the issues, and we'll be probably sharing some of that information shortly too. But has some great lessons to share with his peers, and we'll be dialing into that a little deeper in the coming weeks as well. But have to be aware of the threats that are not just against clients these days, but also against you as MSPs, holding those keys to the kingdom. It's not a moment's rest. I'm happy I'm not an MSP many times, because it's got to be very difficult to go to sleep at night thinking about all the things or something that you may have missed or your team may have missed as you go along. So let's take a step back. And why don't we go back to you, Don? What cybersecurity services do you currently provide? And are they, things that you provide all on your own, or do you partner with other MSPs? What's your ecosystem look like?
Well, before we go there, I just wanted to say, too, I don't know if you guys heard, but in the state of Florida, there was a physician that was hacked. And they didn't go after the physician for the ransom. They went after the patient.
Wow.
Sent emails and information, I have your data. So now they're not just going after the physicians, now they're going after the actual patients of the physician. And that's becoming more and more common as well. So if they don't feel like the doctor's going to pay, they're going to find a way to get the money. So ransomware as a service is definitely very profitable for some people. When it does come to cybersecurity services, we provide some on our own, but also we do a little bit of third-party work as well. Definitely, we have the basics. We have multi-factor. We have managed AV, firewalls. Biggest thing is endpoint detection response, as well as managed threat response. Those are big right now as well. So we're doing that, but we're also, email security, device encryption is a way to go, obviously. And then user education. I cannot stress on user education enough. They're your weakest link, obviously. Hopefully that people have learned a lot from MSPs being hacked, making sure that things are land off and their separate zones and just prevent the lateral movement and those kind of things. And so we provide quite a bit of service, obviously. That's pretty much our sweet spot right now because everybody's talking about it. It's all over the news. It's a constant thing. And so for us, we partner and with some of the industry leaders, definitely platforms for education is a big one for us.
Gotcha. Are there any, I want to say is as you've built out, you're in the Jacksonville, Florida area, and are there any unique security issues that within your clientele that you're dealing with?
No, I think, like I said, users are the biggest problem usually. Just the lack of security. We've had a lot of pushback with multi-factor. A lot of people don't like it, but we explain here's how this keeps you from being breached. And so they kind of kick and scream a little bit, but we push them that way, and they'll eventually get used to it. They need to understand that a lot. Like they do it with their bank. Why would you not do it with your business? So they're learning, but I think it's all an education piece too.
Very good. Eric, what does your cybersecurity portfolio look like?
It's fairly similar to what Dawn described. One of the things we did last year is we hired our first CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. So we were fortunate that a gentleman kind of fell into our lap who did that role for the Chicago Stock Exchange for 30 years. So, you want to talk about a high-profile entity that needs to be protected on a second-by-second basis. This gentleman's got some chops, and we brought him in to start helping us build out. And we're really kind of taking the approach of this isn't an add-on or a bolt-on. This is just what we have to become now. There's going to be a shakeout, this whole MSP versus MSSP. At some point, there's not going to be an option to not have security as part of yours. I mean, I think we're already there. If you're in the IT space and you're not taking security as a building block of what you provide, there's just going to be a day of reckoning for those that aren't making that a core part of their service. So we have the AI-based EDR. I can't agree with Dawn enough on the training component of it as something that we're just hammering that message across the board that you can't, we actually have a document we created that says, here's our baseline security audit of what you're doing, and they have to agree to take on these new services of ours, or they sign a waiver saying we are not responsible for anything. And oh, by the way, it's $200 an hour during business hours, $400 after hours, no guarantee of recovery for anything. So we're shifting that. We're having the discussion as this is a partnership. We both have shared responsibilities in this. Here's what we need to do to be successful. Here's what you need to do to be successful. Also, you've got to do this stuff to yourself. So, to Dawn's point about the training, our last fish test on our own team, we had a 16% hit rate. And these are trained individuals who are, who do this for a living every single day. And 16% of our employees were caught in the phishing. So, you talk about not being able to sleep at night, add that to the list of things that okay, here are trained professionals getting caught. What kind of hope do we have for the average layperson who's not an IT specialist, falling for these types of things?
Yeah.
So that's really the approach we're taking.
So Eric, when you're switching, I know you had two different when you're doing foundational changes like you're doing, building the security and making it more formidable, are you finding that the existing clients, how receptive are they to those changes? Because I know with new clients, it's different. You can take them or leave them, but with your existing clients, what are those discussions like?
It's the toughest thing I think we have is a challenge for our business because we're a victim of our own success. Knock on wood, and I say this as humbly as I possibly can, we have not had incidents in the past that we've had to recover from. And that's a problem when you're going in having discussions with people about, hey, your new bill is going to be $500, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 more because you need these things in place. And they're like, just keep doing what you're doing. We're happy with that.
Right.
That's always worked. So having to explain to people the things we've done in the past to get you the results are not going to get you those same results in the future. It's a very, very huge challenge for us in particular because of, again, the lack of, or the success we've had and the lack of incidents.
Yeah. People want easy, and if they're used to it, familiarity, it's hard to change. Not just inside your MSP business, but for clients, especially when you know that they have a choice to look to other providers. That's a delicate balance. I know sometimes you can't compromise when it comes to security, but you're going to be asked about it, I'm sure.
Well, it's a choice we have to make as a business too. That you have longtime clients who are happy, and now you're like in their eyes, you're jacking their rates up, and you're trying to have these preventative conversations, saying, hey, look, the world's changing. Our tool sets need to change. Our education needs to change. Your investment in your own business needs to change. It's a fundamental shift in how they look at technology and risk. And, we will let them continue on the plan that they're on as long as they sign the waiver saying, we're absolved from anything and we can't guarantee we can protect you or recover. Okay, fine. Then you're assuming the risk. That's a business decision you've made. I can continue doing that as long as you're not going to hold me accountable for the poor results you're likely to get at some point in the future.
Right. Daniel, as far as, similar question, but also what changes have you implemented over the last couple of years in your security practices?
Well, I think, we went from a kind of traditional basic security stack of perimeter security and some basic email filtering and endpoint security. And now, our security portfolio has broadened quite a bit. Just like Don was mentioning, EDR and MTR is entering into the equation. Certainly, we're deploying some specific anti-phishing solutions. But really, it's kind of what Eric was touching on. It's the adoption of the technologies that's key. Creating that roadmap and showing customers the business value and the risk mitigation that they get by embracing this, and really having a repeatable success with your team. Hey, we're going to roll out MFA, then we're going to do conditional access, then we're going to do mobile device management, then we're going to do security awareness education. It takes months to do that. And it is to some customers, it's an increase in cost. I think with there's a lot of opportunity within the channel to embrace certain ecosystems like Microsoft's 365 platform. It includes a lot of those tools, and people are already paying for a lot of those tools. A lot of MSPs just haven't turned those tools and those features on. There's some education that has to happen within the channel, and then go out and educating the customers, create an adoption plan or a roadmap, as Eric was saying, and really driving adoption of that. Now, we take a slightly different approach when it comes to waivers. I completely understand if a customer, especially a larger customer that we might be doing co-managed work for, says, no, we've got our backup situation under control. That's great. I don't necessarily need a waiver from them. But if I'm in that traditional managed services role where I'm the entire IT department, we're providing all of the IT solutions. If I have a customer that is going to waive off of a fundamental key aspect, like we don't want to do MFA or we don't want to do cloud backup to the extent that you want to do, I'm really not interested in a waiver. I'm going to look seriously whether I want to conduct business with that company or not, because I want to be successful. I want them to be successful. And either I'm not providing the right value or the right level of education for them to adopt that, or there's some sort of fundamental problem with the relationship or possibly with their business. So I think it's important as MSPs look at their client base and look at rolling these additional security solutions in. It's tough because I think there's been some miscommunication in the channel over the last 2 years of, hey, every MSP has to turn into an MSSP. Well, those are two completely different business models, two different revenue models, two different operational models. And we looked seriously at, do we want to become an MSSP? And I chose, no, I think we can become a security first MSP. Lead with security, secure your revenue base, because that's really what you're doing as an MSP. Hey, if I secure my customer, I'm securing their ability to conduct business with me. That's securing my own revenue. So by going customer to customer and installing that security framework and having them adopt it as best they can without any major gaps, I'm not only helping my customer, I'm helping my business out, but but I'm not diluting my mission of providing this top level of technical support and, a strategic advice. I think I think it's better for smaller MSPs, especially, to partner with an MSSP. There's plenty of organizations to choose with, and that way they can still, focus on their core strengths without diluting their value proposition to their customers.
Yeah, Daniel, I think you struck on two of those kind of very quickly shifting opinions in that last section. To Don's point earlier is what I think many of the experts and vendors said a couple of years ago is you should go with waivers for everybody and scare them into doing this. And now, as she talked about, that's not the recommended way to do it. Even when we talk to some of the legal attorneys, they're questionable if that absolves you of any liability, which in most cases they believe it doesn't. As an MSP, if you know there's an issue and you move ahead, it still puts you at risk. And I think we're just waiting to see what happens from those that did the waivers in the past and haven't changed that practice. But and then the other one is the MSP versus MSP. I think we're finding the consensus wholeheartedly agree with your point is you don't necessarily have to be an MSSP. You may have a relationship with them or fill in, I won't say gaps in a portfolio, but enhance areas of your cybersecurity practices with other experts. It just makes sense from not just a financial perspective, but a logistics perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the MSP population, the bulk of MSPs are less than 25 employees. It's once you get above 20 employees, it's a different equation, and you might be able to staff a small, effective security operations center. But below 20 employees, and certainly below 10 employees, it's an unrealistic expectation, and I think it's an unrealistic goal. I think you're better to partner.
Eric, you had thoughts?
Yeah, I wanted to say that, Daniel kind of put it a little bit more eloquently than I did in terms of what I was trying to say in terms of the MSP shakeout. You're absolutely right. A true MSSP is a completely different business model. And I think, what I was trying to say is the MSPs that, don't take security seriously, they're not going to be able to survive. So whether that's, partnering or bringing in the stack, and you're right on target about, 20 employees is when you can start doing some things yourself if you're, selling correctly. And I think the reason we took the waiver route is, we fortunately have a lot of clients that have been with us for a long time, and you have relationships built up. And one of the things that's going to happen at some point is there will be turnover in those clients. New leadership will come in with a different mindset. And what we're trying to do is preserve those relationships that have been very successful for us, but also make sure that they understand times change, responsibilities have to be updated. So, to your point, the first time we have to test a waiver, we'll see if that actually made any sense or not. And, hopefully it doesn't come to that. And if it does, it holds up.
Yeah, we hope you don't have to go that route. But there were many vendors that are still promoting that in the channel. And there hasn't been anybody that just came out and said, don't do this yet. But it seems like we're moving in that direction, as you probably want to move away from those as much as we can.
Well, we're not using it as a scare tactic. It's the people we have, like to Daniel's point, like if you're in a good partnership, they should be taking your advice because that's what they brought you on for. You're the expert in this field. So we're using it as a partner, more of a partnership. Like, hey, if we're truly partners in this, you take my advice. We're telling you this for your best interest, not because some vendor wants me to sell a tool. We see what's happening every day. We read all the news stories. We get all the background information. You don't. It's not your business. It's our business. And we're trying to protect you because, I feel we have a fiduciary responsibility to all of our clients to make sure to protect their businesses. But we have to educate them too. And, I'm very anti-fear-based selling. Unless somebody's heard the message like 6 different ways and they're ignoring it and fear's your last option, sometimes that's the only way certain people respond. So it's a tool.
You're saying it's not good to go in and just slap them a couple times and say, do this the right way. That's probably
for most people, no.
not kosher anymore.
I think there is a place for that waiver. And I think it's that right where you said that, if all else fails, well, okay, then sign here. Because I think that drives home that point of, okay, I've really tried here. I've tried to educate you. We've looked into options. We've looked into alternatives, but okay.
Gotcha.
And that's why we created our own, because, if you look at the vendors, and right or wrong, they have their own agenda. They're trying to sell their services. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of this stuff is fear-mongering, fear-based, because it does have an effect. I just don't subscribe to that theory. I'm a relationship person. We're in this business for the long haul. We want to build relationships. And if somebody trusts me, I don't want to come in and scare them unless they need to be scared because they've ignored all the other warning signs.
Gotcha. That makes
sense. I don't think it's truly a scare tactic. I mean, and the way we put it to our clients is, you wouldn't go to the doctor with a broken arm and go, here's what you're going to do, doc, to my arm to fix it. Because you're not the expert in that field. You're not going to say, okay, you can use this pen, but I really don't want you to give me this anesthesia or this or that. It's not a pick and choose anymore. And to keep I truly believe that to keep our business going and to keep growing, we need to make changes. So what we've done is, with new clients, when they come on, they automatically get everything. There is no other option. And that keeps us safe as well as the client. Yeah, they may not understand that, but it's our job to educate them as well. But also, too, all the old clients, here's the reasoning why. Let me explain to you. You wouldn't do that. So the doctor analogy seems to work quite well.
Yeah. The only area of an MSP business I've seen where it's a similar challenge is when you change your payment policies. It's easy to do it on a new client, but on the existing clients, they are totally resistant to change. And those are tough conversations to have. I need you to pay me using, a secure payment portal, or I need to put you on regular monthly payments automatic. And it's easier to do with the newer clients because that's the baseline than it is with.
Right.
Yeah, I don't. Again, that's another area where I'm glad I'm not an MSP. You have some tough discussions to have. But Don, let's go back to you on this one. What's the best approach? Because this is a common question we get, especially at the IoTSSA Cybersecurity Expos. Is what's the best approach for selling cybersecurity to a new business prospect? Is there a process, test, topic, or something else that you use to get potential clients engaged in meaningful conversation?
Well, I think I definitely feel like you need to look at what your prospect looks like. Obviously, you need to determine whether or not there's PII or PHI involved, whether or not there's financials that are going to be on that network, devices that may leave in and out of the network. I think those are big things. But in the whole approach, I think selling cybersecurity, we do a lot of sales and marketing. That's my background, so that's kind of our sweet spot. But when we talk about these things, I think that going through these things and discussing, does this device leave? You need device encryption if it's going to leave this office. It's explaining to them. I think it's like, you can't just make a cookie cutter approach to this. It has to be based on their business and what they do. Because not every business is the same. Even all MSPs are different, even in a sense. You don't know, I may lock our remote monitoring tools down to this IP address in our office, and that's it. The only other option is to VPN, which would be a safeguard for our staff. But somebody else may not do that. They may use a cloud-based solution, so it may be completely different. So it's looking at those different prospects and saying, okay, what are your needs? What do you need? What does your business do? And by defining those things, then you can discuss what exactly they need from a cybersecurity standpoint.
So it's doing your homework as you would
Absolutely.
On anything else, and understanding the best approach as opposed to, doing one set way. And
right.
do you do a lot on your prospecting? I don't want to dig too deep, but do you do a lot of online research with potential clients?
Oh yeah. I know a lot about them before we ever meet with them.
Excellent. How about let's shift to you, Daniel.
So we have a tendency to kind of take a look at a customer, like Don is saying, look at their existing environment, look at what business they're in, what are the important pieces that we need to put in place for them so they can, maybe they're in a compliance framework, and we need to make sure that we're meeting critical pieces. I think, though, for most MSPs and for us in general, I agree that you shouldn't take a cookie cutter approach, but there is a little bit of value in a kind of a repeatable formula or a repeatable success. So we're developing some scorecards which are just simply kind of the top 10 things that we can run through with a prospect or with an existing customer and say, do we have these top 10 things in place? Do we have an anti-phishing solution in place? Do we have MFA in place? Do we have conditional access in place? Do we need EDR or MTR for your environment, or are there certain pieces that need that, and maybe everybody else can use standard AV? Are the firewalls current? Is all the data backed up? What's the duration of the retention for that backup, and how fast can we get it back, and all this? So real basic things, because I think that the industry in general, we're all technicians. A lot of us are technicians at heart, and we have a tendency to go deep on the geek factor. So we run network scans, and we look at Active Directory, and we look at all these things, and I think sometimes we miss the fundamentals of, are we backing up all the things, and are we securing all the things, and do we have a secure workflow? Are we, it's hard because, like with security awareness education, we tell everybody in the world, don't click on that link and don't enter your credentials. But here's this email encryption program. Send all your emails encrypted. You have to click a link and you have to enter your credentials. So it can be very confusing to end users. So, but just covering the basics from a scorecard standpoint, that helps customers realize where they're at, where they're headed from a roadmap standpoint. And I think it unlocks some of that initial conversation, and then you can kind of dig into details like Don is saying, like what vertical industry are they in, what special needs do they have. But really, until you have those foundational elements, I have a tendency to gloss over the details until then.
Eric, about on your side, on the sales side, and also I guess in this part, and maybe I'll go back to Dawn and Daniel on this too, have you used dark web monitoring in any cases before you've gone in as well? Are you using any of those tools in your preparation for selling to new prospects?
Yeah, so the first part of your question, in terms of how I approach it, it depends on how the meeting got acquired. So if we were the ones doing, the prospecting and they accepted a meeting, it's a little bit of a different premise because, they weren't soliciting our expertise. We're trying to get in the door with them. They may feel like they're fine already. So it's a much different approach of, okay, well, what's your benchmark for fine? Show me the data that you have, and what do you know currently about best practices and what's important to you? When they came to us, then it's, okay, well, what brought you here? Because if it's a security incident already, that's a whole different discussion. Like, what do you know about what started this? Why is this important to you? So there's a couple different paths you can go down depending on how the meeting originated, whether it's through your marketing efforts or through them coming to you because of a referral or an incident or something along those lines. And as far as the tools, we've used the dark web stuff that's out there. There's several different tools. We've used them all. And a lot of the times what happens is there's the initial shock. Then somebody does some investigation. They find out, a lot of the passwords aren't being used anymore. That person's not here, so it's not an issue. Even though it is an issue if things weren't properly offboarded. So it hasn't had the impact that I know some other people are having, but I haven't seen it move the needle enough to where people see information on the dark web and go. I think people are almost desensitized to it these days, where every other day somebody's gotten, there's been a database breach exposure, your credentials are out there. I think almost all people just assume their information's on the dark web now. It seems like, because of the news media just reporting them every day.
We're aiming low now, is what you're saying, is we just assume we've been hacked, but yeah. At least it does help start the conversations, though, correct? With
for sure,
a path to go down to investigate what the issues may have been, and to take a deeper look. How about you, Don?
A lot of people don't know what the dark web is too. You kind of have to educate them on that part of it.
Right. Yeah. So I don't want to spend as much time. But Don, any of those tools that you're utilizing within your sales team?
Yeah, dark web, obviously. We do look at the domains and see where they have breaches. No, I would say 98% of them have had some sort of a breach on a credential. This depends on how new it is. A lot of them are older that we do see, so those are passwords, like Eric said, that have been discontinued or that person's no longer there, and they feel like, well, okay, I'm safe in that respect, or they expect it. They expect everyone to have a breach somehow, somewhere. I mean, I don't know if, I always get these emails that say, hey, look, we found your credentials again. And it's always something that I was into, whether it be, LinkedIn or wherever it was. Those are credentials that have long since been gone, but obviously it's tied to my email box, right? So I think just being more proactive and discussing those things with clients, but also too, kind of just educating them on what the dark. A lot of them don't understand the dark web at all. They just hear about it on the news. They don't understand what's the relevance of it. So I think education is a big piece again, like I said. But yeah, we do use some of those tools, and they seem to be fairly effective. We had one that just didn't think it was a great idea at all, and I literally just didn't know what to say. I mean, they had several pages worth of credentials. And I'm like, you don't think it's a big deal? No. It was kind of eye-opening, and I've seen where, vendors' credentials have been out on the dark web as well. So they get alerted as well. So it's definitely eye-opening for people.
Let's hope that wasn't a bank or a law firm. That's all I've got to say about that.
No, it was not, but still. I don't think it really matters anymore.
Right.
So.
That makes sense. Daniel, do you have any additional points to add to the sales discussion?
Yeah, I think it's an important piece to have dark web monitoring as part of your security portfolio. I think sometimes it's a tough discussion to have with customers because sometimes it dips into their personal lives a little bit. Some people are using their corporate credentials for personal apps, and sometimes they don't. It might not be super sensitive, but maybe it's just a fitness app or a weight loss app or something like that. They might be sensitive about that. I think where we see it heading is on targeted groups. So if you have a particular group, an operations group, an accounting or finance group, and certainly the C-level groups of larger customers, or even small customers, really just the business leadership, I think it's important to maybe line up a specific discussion with those groups, do the dark web scanning on their corporate ID, and possibly ask them, do you want to do this with your personal IDs as well? Because we want to make sure that controller or that CFO or that important person that's handling wire transfers, we want to protect them from phishing, but we also want to protect them from being personally exploited. And those are sensitive, confidential conversations. Some of those search results can cross the line into, hey, this is an HR discussion rather than you're just a third-party IT vendor. But I think there's an opportunity there to shore up our defenses as an industry, but also help our customers to utilize some of these dark web tools to make sure that those sensitive positions and departments are protected from a holistic standpoint. And it's not just a security tool, but it's kind of, to Don's point, it's that education piece. It's, hey, be careful. Make sure you're using credentials properly. Even your personal, your Gmail account or your Outlook.com account or whatever, that you're monitoring that, because we wouldn't want to have someone compromising their personal life and then bleed over to their professional life. So, but they're hard conversations to have, and usually you have to be firmly entrenched in that customer in a position of trust before you can do that. I think there's obviously some sales prospecting that can be done, to show people exposure. I think I have a hard time making that sales pitch just because we have a tendency to come in kind of to Eric's point that maybe something has already happened, and I don't want to rattle them further by showing them the results of the dark web, but want to remediate them first, gain that trust, and then have that discussion afterwards as a second or third phase. But I think it's a valuable tool for the industry for sure.
Very good. Let's move on to one of the things we touched on. The risks to an MSP business. There's a lot being targeted by cyber criminals. There's errors that happen within your own business as well. Eric, let me start with this. How are you minimizing the internal threats in your business? And how has that changed, I guess, over the last couple of years too? Because I know we've seen a lot of transitions.
Yeah, so, one of the things, obviously, I mentioned before, we hired a CISO last year, to really kind of oversee everything security in our organization. We audited all of our tools. We reached out to our vendors for best practices just to make sure we're following them. So we have, 2FA enabled everywhere. The IP lockdowns, VPN tunnels with 2FA enabled on them. There's a laundry list of things we did, and it still doesn't ever feel like it's enough. Because unless you wrote the code, and because we actually do some software development here too, so we're kind of at the mercy of some of these vendors. And, you look at the big three that are out there, I mean, they've got bullseyes on them, because the hackers know we're deploying tools that give us remote access into our clients. We reviewed remote desktop. We discontinued some offerings we were, given to help people remote into their systems, and now insist on encrypted VPNs with, 2FA enabled on them. So a lot has been done, from an internal audit standpoint, and, additional staffing to make sure that we're addressing this. We have a full-on process for, our just check and verify all the backups, because if something does happen, that's your only recourse. So there's a lot of notifications that come in and out every day, and that's also a problem. The more data you have, the more likely you are to miss something. So I think the next step for us is, a SIEM and a SOC to make sure all of our information is being aggregated and assessed by a security professional team to make sure we're not compromised in any way.
Very good. Let me shift over to Dawn. The same question is what things are you doing within your business to tighten it down tighter, other than sitting in a data center as you are right now, I know?
We've done a lot to change things. Obviously, we've done multi-factor even with our VPNs or multi-factor. Our clients are learning that as well. But also locking the IPs down here, separating the zones for your backups. All of those things are broken out. Your voice over IP phones, all that stuff should be separated, and a lot of people are still not doing that. Another thing we have recently discovered is we're going to up our insurance, and by doing so, one of the requirements is when a client calls into the office, they need to two-factor themselves as well, so that we don't authenticate to somebody that is not a true person that is a client. So that's a new one for us.
Phone authentication?
Yeah, so they'll have to get a code to their cell phone,
okay,
and then they'll have to read that code to us. So those are the things that we're looking at right now as adding those things, because some of these insurance companies are requiring those things as well. So with our clients, obviously, we've definitely kind of locked them down too, but also education. We require our staff to go through education training. They have pieces every week that they do. So anti-phishing, things of that nature. I think it's constant. You have to educate, especially internally. Our staff, they kind of balk because they can't get to networks unless they use the VPN with a two-factor when they're outside of our network. And that's tough to get used to. But at the end of the day, it's all about safety. This is keeping us all employed.
Yeah. And I know that's part of the business of an MSP is you have to build trust, but that old Ronald Reagan quote, trust but verify. I think the verifying is getting larger and larger. And Daniel, why don't we tie into you too? Are there things that you're doing much differently than you were a couple of years ago?
Well, certainly we're doing, MFA, all the things, definitely locking down things. We don't have a tendency to whitelist things because we know that our office is a target, and we don't want to whitelist our office because it could be one of the PCs in our office. So we want multi-factor authentication on everything at all times. I think there's a specific thing around identity verification, like you were mentioning, Don, but also just internal identity management for MSP employees with a keen eye on role-based access. So, when you're a small MSP and you're dealing with things like Office 365, everybody has access to the global admin account for every customer. Well, that needs to change. Not everybody needs global access. And sometimes you might need to put in a tool that's helping you to provide the just amount of rights for that employee, for a service desk employee versus an engineer versus an account manager. Really restricting the ability, especially in the RMM platforms, of people to be able to create components or be able to deploy EXEs or MSIs, so that they can't, create a flood of, every one of our customers got pushed this ransomware. Locking down the ability of people to be able to create components that would further an attack like that. So, and it all kind of comes back to role-based access. Who needs access to this? Do we only need access to this once a month or so? Can we keep it locked down the rest of the time? Can we just assign this particular elevated role to one person? Or even maybe it's a two-man rule, a two-person rule to unlock that type of thing. So it's taking a little bit more granular approach on some of those attack vectors, and making sure that we're obviously following all the industry best practices, but also just really getting granular in our tool set. Who really needs access to what, and just taking that approach. I think that's a lesson that everybody's going to learn over time, because so many of these exploits are about, they didn't have 2FA or MFA on their RMM, or they didn't have their VPNs locked down, but it's also, there was just elevated privileges. So just taking those elevated privileges away, giving people the right amount of privilege at the right time is key.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank all three of you for that advice. Unfortunately, we're getting close to running out of time. I could go all day here because you guys are fantastic, but I want to respect your time as well as our listeners. So let me ask one final question for you all, and we'll kind of do a lightning round. Why don't I start with Dawn? What's one good piece of not so common advice you'd like to share with MSPs on building a cybersecurity practice as we roll out today?
It's really kind of, I don't really know that it's not common, but obviously MSPs need to do their due diligence, and they need, it's not just about like a specific certification. There's all kinds of things out there. They definitely need to look at different things and be able to stay in the know. I see a lot of MSPs that go stale, that their staff tends to not train as often and be up to date on new certifications or new teaching opportunities. They're not there. So I think that's a big one.
Fantastic, because I know there's a lot of new training programs and things rolling out. CompTIA just rolled out a couple of things here in the last couple of weeks as well, I noticed too, so that's fantastic. Daniel?
I think it's key for MSPs to kind of take a step back, take a step away from the technology and the gizmos and the fancy knobs, and really look at this business outcome that we're trying to produce. Whether it's MFA or anti-phishing, what we're trying to prevent is fraud. What we're trying to prevent is loss. And I think if we start with those higher level fundamentals of going to your customer and say, let me educate you on how to prevent you from going out of business, prevent you from suffering fraud attempts, prevent you from losing money. I think you can start that conversation there and then get into the details. I think taking a technology first approach kind of hampers our efforts because we're trying to convince somebody that a gee whiz solution is going to save them. When really, we're just trying to protect their business.
Excellent suggestion. And Eric?
Yeah, I think one of the things that if you're just kind of getting started in this, or you're having that drink from a fire hose, kind of like, oh my God, there's so many things we should be doing. The first step is look at your backups, because if something does happen, the backups could be the thing that saves you a lot of time and a lot of headache if you've got it at least done correctly to where you can recover. Some of the things we talked about is, now the bad guys are going to take the data that they've got and try to use that, and they're getting a little bit more confident with going after those sources. But, if you've got to start somewhere, look at your backup scheme, client by client, your own backups for your own company, and we actually took a client this year, or the end of last year, started on this year. Their MSP internally got hacked, and they were hosting the email within the MSP, and literally a week, 2 weeks went by, and like they had no recovery internally. So if you're hosting services, what's your own internal backup scheme? And then the other part of that is test your employees. I mean, look, we found, here we are, it's 2020. We spend a lot of time and money on training, and 16% of our teams still failed the fish test. Keep testing them, keep educating them, make sure you got good backups.
Excellent suggestion. So with that, I can't thank all of you enough for joining me today and for all the things you do for IOTSSA too as advisory board members. We certainly appreciate it and look forward to maybe diving into some of these subjects and topics further in 2020 and beyond too. So with that, I want to thank Daniel, Dawn, and Eric for sharing their great insight today. And to all of our listeners, please check the IOTSSA website for more resources. It's iotsa.com. We have fantastic channel-specific cybersecurity education, podcasts, blogs, and we'll see more resources being added throughout 2020 as well. And I'd like to thank you all and wish you a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.